Hi Trigoners. So this video is about statistical studies. So this is all about different ways that we can sample and collect information from people, knowing that a random sample is really the best way to go. So the first kind is a survey. Surveys are relatively easy to conduct. They provide quick results and can often provide interesting and captivating media headlines. The key to using a survey for collecting data is all about the questions that you use and making sure that you get good participation. So there are different types of questions, and loaded questions, leading questions, and confusing questions are those you should avoid. So you have sample survey questions could be like, do you like the cafeteria's food? Versus, for each of the following items offered by our cafeteria, identify whether you A, like the item, B, do not like the item, or C, have never tried the item. When you read the first question, do you like the cafeteria's food? It implies that you've actually been to the cafeteria. And maybe you've been to the cafeteria, but you've never actually tried the food. So how do you respond to something accurately and really give somebody information if you've never been a participant in the cafeteria? Which is why the second question is better, because it helps the person understand if you've ever tried that cafeteria item to be able to like it or not like it. Here are two other questions. Don't you think that a small increase in property taxes is a worthwhile investment for improving the quality of education for our children? Versus, our town is considering a 4% increase in property taxes to raise funds for a new school to be built. What is your opinion on the proposed increase in property taxes? So the first question leads the phrase, don't you think that a small increase? Anybody would probably respond yes, because you're talking about children and them being a worthwhile investment. Versus the second question is fact. Our town is considering a 4% increase, and where would that money go? It would go to a new school being built. So the second way is a better way to phrase it, because it's a question that doesn't make somebody feel the need to respond in a certain way. The next thing to consider is how participants are selected for your survey. We already know that sampling randomly is really the right way to go, and often it can be challenging to randomly assign every single person in your population a random number, and then figure out how you're going to get the surveys to them. But still, it's going to be a goal that you get as much randomization as possible, because every single person in that population should get an equal chance. Suppose you decide to go with convenience. One way to create participants in a survey is to go stand in front of a grocery store at 5 o'clock and get the first 20 responses. Well, you might have to consider who is going to the grocery store at 5 o'clock. And it might be the people that are coming home from work. They're going home, but they're stopping at the grocery store first. So those type of people might provide different answers to you than somebody if you got random participants throughout the day. If you look at only the people that might want to volunteer, those could be the people that are angriest about the situation, or they could be the happiest about the situation. And so again, they can spin your survey results in a certain direction and not paint you a true picture of your population. The others could be those that are compensated. People can often be paid to provide answers to a survey. And so again, those are people that want the money to do that, and it's not necessarily the most accurate information. I'm not going to go through it here, but the 1936 presidential election had Alf Landon versus Franklin D. Roosevelt. And if you're really interested in that situation, it's a really, really cool example about how participants in a survey can change how data is representing your population. So just remember that you want your survey to represent your population, and it's really, really important to try to get as much randomization as possible, or to at least think through a situation or a process that can get you accurate representation in your population. The next type of study is an observational study. And this is when we don't attempt to impose a treatment or influence the responses of those being studied. And in an observational study, here's an example. Researchers investigate the link between hours of sleep the night before an exam and performance on the exam. I think that's something that people would be really interested in. We think that if students sleep a lot the night before, then they're probably going to do better on the exam. But this is not a situation in which we would impose a treatment. We would not say to somebody, you can't sleep at all the night before a test, or you have to sleep for 14 hours before the night of a test. That's not really something ethical that we would want to do to somebody, because not only is sleep an important part of their life, but it also might have implications on their performance on the exam. And the performance on the exam could have impacts to their transcript, to their GPA. The implications go on and on. So an observational study can look at several different variables and how they relate to each other. But that's all it is that you can collect the data once it's already happened, but you don't actually impose a treatment. The main disadvantage of an observational study is that you can't conclude a cause and effect relationship. Or like a perfect cause and effect. You can just conclude that there's a correlation. For example, I'm going to read just this first one right here, and there's other websites that you can go to explore this, but there is a positive correlation between ice cream sales and drowning accidents. And yes, we've observed the counts on these, and yes, there is like a positive trend then that when ice cream sales go up, the number of drowning accidents go up as well. But the reason for that is that it's summertime, and people are buying more ice cream during the summer, and perhaps they're going swimming more. And so the fact that it's summer is really the variable that's bringing those two together. The next type of statistical study is an experiment, and that is when we impose a treatment to see how it impacts the response. If an experiment is well designed and conducted, experiments do enable a cause and effect conclusion to be made. So when you're designing a good experiment, you want to include a large enough sample size. And by large enough sample size, you can get into stats courses where what does large enough actually mean? But oftentimes it's about bigger than 30, like 30 people or 30 objects. You want to choose subjects that accurately represent the target population. So again, that's randomization generally. You want to assign subjects randomly to the treatment and control groups. So you're going to divide your group into a group that's going to get the treatment, and a control group is a group that does not get the treatment. And there's various ways to talk about how you control, but as long as you separate your subjects into getting the treatment and not getting the treatment, then you've done your job there. The next thing is that you want to control for anything else that could play a part into the response. So you want your treatment to be explaining what is happening to the response. So you don't want to add on a third variable or a fourth variable that's kind of like hanging out within your experiment that could actually be impacting your response perhaps more than the treatment. And the last criteria is that it needs to be ethical. You don't want to impose any treatment that's actually going to hurt somebody. So it needs to make sure that it's still safe for the subjects that are in your experiment.